Imagine waking up one morning to find a violation notice taped to your door. Your crime? A single leaf had dared to land on your driveway. Now, imagine the person responsible is your HOA's self-appointed dictator, Karen. Clipboard in hand, fueled by an unstoppable thirst for power, she's not just enforcing rules, she's making them up. And just when you think it can't get any worse, she tries to charge you rent for your own house. Sounds unbelievable, right? Buckle up, because this is the story of how I went to war with HOA Karen. Hello, beautiful peoples. Where are you watching this video from? It was a peaceful neighborhood, the kind where kids rode their bikes until dusk, the smell of weekend barbecues filled the air, and for the most part, everyone minded their own business. At least, that was the case until Karen arrived. Clipboard in hand, attitude sharper than her overplucked eyebrows, she had declared herself the unofficial queen of the cul-de-sac. And apparently, my house was her new favorite battleground. It started small. A note on my door about my non-regulation garden gnome. A warning about my grass being an unacceptable length. A friendly, but somehow threatening, reminder that my garbage bins had been out for an extended period, aka 5 minutes past the scheduled time. I tried to brush it off. Some people take their HOA duties a little too seriously, right? But Karen wasn't just some overzealous rule enforcer. She was on a power trip, and I was her personal project. One morning, I found her standing on the sidewalk, hands on her hips, glaring at my mailbox like it had personally insulted her. When I asked if there was a problem, she wasted no time in slapping a notice against my chest. Your mailbox is an inch too high. It's a safety hazard. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. That was when I knew this wasn't just about rules. It was about control. I tried reasoning with her, explaining that my house was well within the HOA guidelines. But every response from Karen came with a dramatic gasp and exaggerated horror. When I mentioned that my door color was pre-approved, she clutched her pearls as if I had just announced I was painting it neon green with sparkles. The more I pushed back, the more ridiculous she became. She started handing out fines like they were Halloween candy. And then she did it. A letter arrived in my mailbox, demanding that I begin paying rent for living in my own home. Yes, rent. Karen, in all her wisdom, had decided that since the HOA technically managed the community, homeowners should pay them a resident fee on top of normal dues. I laughed. Hard. But Karen wasn't joking. She escalated quickly, threatening legal action, filing complaints with the HOA board, and even going so far as to claim I was in violation of neighborhood residency policies. My crime? Existing, apparently. The neighbors had their own horror stories. Tom next door told me she had accused his cat of trespassing on her property. Another neighbor, Lisa, whispered that Karen had once taken photos of her flowers to prove they weren't in line with the approved seasonal color scheme. A small rebellion began brewing. People started sharing their Karen encounters like war stories, quietly questioning if we were all living in some kind of HOA dictatorship. That's when I decided enough was enough. I went full detective mode. I gathered every absurd violation notice she'd issued, took photos of her own infractions. Turns out her garden gnome wasn't HOA approved either, and even managed to dig up meeting minutes proving she had no real authority. The final straw came when Karen, in an act of unhinged desperation, trespassed onto my lawn with a measuring tape to confirm my grass was over the regulation height. Security cameras caught the whole thing. At the next HOA meeting, I presented my evidence like a prosecutor in a courtroom drama. The board, clearly tired of Karen's antics, was ready to listen. One by one, neighbors shared their own grievances. The tide had turned. And then came the moment of poetic justice. The HOA president turned to Karen, a smirk barely concealed. Karen, according to these reports, you've been in violation of multiple HOA guidelines yourself. For the first time in recorded history, Karen was speechless. The verdict was swift. The HOA voted her out of her position, issued her fines for her own violations, and made it abundantly clear that if she continued her antics, she'd face real consequences. It was a beautiful moment. The neighborhood celebrated that evening, not with words, but with a collective display of unapproved holiday decorations. Karen, defeated, eventually moved away, muttering something about the neighborhood going downhill. The grass grew freely, the mailboxes stood proudly, and we all slept a little easier knowing that our driveways were, finally, Karen-proof. Karen's reign of terror didn't take long to escalate. At first, it was little things, a strongly worded note about unsightly garden decorations, a reminder that all porch lights must be warm white and not cool white. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that Karen wasn't just enforcing HOA rules. She was making them up as she went along. One morning, I stepped outside to grab my mail and nearly tripped over an envelope taped to my front door. A violation notice. My crime? A single leaf had dared to rest on my driveway. I stared at the paper, then at the offending leaf, which fluttered innocently in the breeze. Before I could even process the absurdity, Karen materialized from seemingly nowhere, arms crossed and clipboard in hand. "I warned you about keeping your property in order," she said, nodding toward the leaf like it was evidence in a murder trial. I blinked. "It's a leaf. It fell from a tree." Karen didn't seem to care. "It's about maintaining the neighborhood standard," she huffed. "If everyone let leaves pile up, where would we be?" I wasn't sure what dystopian leaf-covered wasteland she imagined, but I knew better than to argue. Instead, I bent down, picked up the single offending leaf, and dramatically tossed it into the trash. "There. Crisis averted." Karen scowled, clearly displeased with my lack of fear. But she wasn't done yet. A few days later, she knocked on my door, holding a printed list of supposed infractions. "Your mailbox is half an inch too high. That's a violation." I sighed. It was installed by the builder. "It's the same height as every other mailbox on the street." She pursed her lips. "And yet it looks taller. I'll have to issue a warning." I laughed, assuming she was joking. She wasn't. She pulled a tape measure from her bag and actually measured my mailbox. Then came the grass incident. One afternoon, I saw her crouching in my front yard, holding a ruler to the lawn. "Excuse me," I called out, watching as she adjusted her bifocals and scrutinized a single blade of grass like a scientist in a lab. She stood up, triumphant. "This grass is over 3 inches tall. That's outside of regulation." I stared at her, waiting for some kind of indication that this was a prank. But Karen wasn't the joking type. "It rained yesterday," I said deadpan. "The grass grew. That's no excuse." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Karen, it's literally nature. Rules are rules," she said smugly, handing me another violation notice. At this point, it was obvious she wasn't just enforcing HOA guidelines. She was on a power trip. Every week, there was something new. My recycling bin was 1 inch too close to the curb. My wind chimes were too disruptive to the aesthetic harmony of the street. My welcome mat was too large for a standard doorway. I began to wonder if she was inventing these rules just for me. But the real tipping point came when she showed up at my house with a serious look on her face, holding a legal-looking document. "You're in violation of HOA policy," she declared. "You need to start paying rent for living in this community." I choked on my coffee. "Excuse me?" Karen folded her arms. "The HOA maintains the neighborhood, and since you benefit from that, it's only fair that you pay a resident fee." I blinked. "Karen, I own my house." She didn't even flinch. "And that doesn't mean you live here for free." That was when I realized this wasn't just about her hating my lawn, my mailbox, or my welcome mat. Karen wanted total control that I knew arguing with Karen was pointless. She thrived on conflict, fueled by the sheer joy of making other people's lives miserable. So instead of losing my mind over her ridiculousness, I decided to take a different approach, subtle retaliation. First, I played by her rules to the extreme. Since my mailbox was apparently too tall, I measured every single mailbox on the street. Turns out, at least 5 other mailboxes were higher than mine. I took pictures, printed them out, and the next time Karen tried to give me a violation notice, I handed her a full report titled, "An Investigation into the Heights of Local Mailboxes, a Case Study." She turned red. This is completely unnecessary." "Oh, I agree," I said cheerfully. "But if we're enforcing regulations, we should be consistent." She stomped away, fuming. Then there was the grass debacle. If she was going to measure my lawn with a ruler, I was going to one-up her. I printed out a detailed grass measurement log and taped it to my front door, tracking the height of every blade. Each day, I updated it with dramatic notes. Day 3, grass at 2.7 inches. Potential HOA violation imminent. Day 5, rain has caused unauthorized growth. Need legal counsel. Day 7, Karen spotted in the vicinity. Grass remains a national security threat. Neighbors loved it. People started taking pictures and laughing every time they walked by. Karen? Not so much. And then came the wind chimes incident. Karen had sent me a notice claiming my wind chimes were too loud and disrupting the neighborhood aesthetic. Mind you, my wind chimes were small, delicate, and barely audible. But fine. If Karen wanted to complain about them, I'd make it worth her while. I went online and found the biggest, loudest wind chimes available. I'm talking church bell levels of loud. I installed them with pride, and the next windy day, they rang out like a symphony of chaos. Karen nearly had an aneurysm. She stormed up to my house, furious. "This is unacceptable." I shrugged. "I got rid of the old ones, just like you asked. These are HOA compliant." She turned 50 shades of red. But the real masterpiece? The driveway art. Karen had fined me for a single leaf on my driveway, so I decided to decorate in a way that truly embraced the clean aesthetic she wanted. Using washable sidewalk chalk, I wrote the word Karen in big, elegant letters across my driveway, surrounded by decorative swirls and arrows pointing toward her house. Neighbors loved it. Karen, not so much. The next day, I found another violation notice taped to my door, this time accusing me of graffiti and defacing my property. I calmly hosed it off. Karen was livid. She started escalating, filing nonsense complaints with the HOA, sending daily violation notices, and even accusing my mailbox of being a threat to community safety. At this point, I knew I had to step things up. It was time to gather evidence. The neighborhood had been watching the Karen saga unfold like a reality TV show, and let me tell you, people were invested. At first, some neighbors kept their heads down, afraid of drawing Karen's wrath. But after weeks of my violations becoming more absurd by the day, whispers started to spread. Tom, my next-door neighbor, caught me outside one evening and shook his head. She tried to find me last week for my cat trespassing on her lawn. I stared at him. "Your cat?" He nodded. She said he was disturbing the neighborhood's balance. "He's 15 years old and sleeps 22 hours a day." Another neighbor, Lisa, leaned in. "Last month, she took pictures of my flowers and said they weren't in line with the approved seasonal color scheme." "Wait," I said. "There's a seasonal color scheme?" She shrugged. "Apparently, but she made it up. The HOA president didn't even know about it." It was official. Karen had gone rogue. Soon, the neighborhood group chat exploded. People started sharing their own Karen horror stories. Someone got a warning for excessive lawn chair usage. Another neighbor was fined because their car was parked too symmetrically in the driveway. A guy 3 houses down got a violation for leaving his curtains open too long. It was like she woke up every morning, rolled the dice, and picked a new nonsense rule to enforce. But the best part? People started fighting back. One night, I walked outside and noticed something magical: Christmas lights. Karen had banned them the year before, claiming they disrupted neighborhood uniformity. But in a quiet act of rebellion, one by one, neighbors started putting them up, out of season. By the end of the week, the street was glowing with a full-blown Christmas spectacle in the middle of spring. Karen lost her mind. She went house to house, knocking on doors, threatening fines, demanding takedowns. People smiled, nodded, and added more lights. Then came the ultimate HOA meeting. I walked in to find half the neighborhood already there. Karen sat front and center, clutching a binder labeled Neighborhood Offenders. She looked smug. "This community is in chaos," she declared. "People are violating basic order. We need stricter enforcement." Then she pulled out a PowerPoint. Yes, a PowerPoint. She clicked through slides of infractions. A mailbox an inch too high. A gnome too whimsical. A wind chime that she described as sonic terrorism. When she finally reached my driveway chalk art, she gasped dramatically. "This," she said, voice trembling, "is an attack on my character." That's when Tom, the cat owner, leaned forward. "Karen, what exactly is your position on the HOA board?" Silence. The HOA president cleared his throat. "Actually, Karen isn't on the board." More silence. Another neighbor spoke up. "Wait, so she's just been making up rules?" The room exploded. Half the street had been fined for things that weren't even real violations. People started pulling out notices, demanding explanations. Karen started stammering, flipping through her binder of nonsense. And that's when I knew. Karen's reign was about to end. Karen's downfall didn't happen all at once. It was a slow, glorious unraveling, like watching a poorly made Jenga tower collapse in slow motion. After the HOA meeting revealed she wasn't even on the board, her power started slipping. People stopped taking her seriously. They ignored her violations. They laughed in her face. But Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. She doubled down. First, she started writing fake complaint letters, not from the HOA, but from herself, as if she had any authority. She even forged an official HOA letterhead, but everyone could tell it was fake because the formatting was terrible. Then she went full undercover investigator mode. One night, my security cameras caught her trespassing in my yard, again. This time, she wasn't just measuring my grass. She was taking pictures of my house. The next morning, I found another formal notice taped to my door. The offense: unauthorized bird activity. I actually laughed out loud. Karen, are you serious? She crossed her arms. Your bird feeder is attracting unregistered birds. That's an environmental hazard. I blinked. Do you expect me to get birds HOA approved? She didn't even hesitate. Yes. At this point, I knew I had her. Because while she was busy waging her personal war against reality, I had been gathering evidence. Every violation notice, every forged document, every ridiculous claim. I had it all in one neat little folder. And it turns out, I wasn't the only one. The HOA president called for a special meeting. The moment Karen walked in, you could tell she knew something was wrong. The president wasted no time. Karen, we've received multiple complaints about you, and we need to discuss your recent behavior. She scoffed. My behavior? I'm the only one keeping order around here. I slid my folder onto the table. Actually, we've got some questions. One by one, the neighborhood started coming forward. Tom presented security footage of Karen peering into his windows to check for curtain violations. Lisa revealed a stack of fake HOA letters Karen had left in her mailbox. Another neighbor showed a time-stamped video of Karen trespassing on their property to inspect their suspicious Halloween decorations. And then came the nail in the coffin. The HOA president pulled out a final document. Karen, we've reviewed your past violations, and it turns out you've broken multiple HOA regulations yourself. Karen's face drained of color. Turns out, her own fence was too high. Her flower pots were unapproved colors. She had non-regulation holiday lights in storage, which she had fined other people for. The best part, she had fined herself without realizing it. The HOA board ruled unanimously. Karen was stripped of any authority, officially banned from filing complaints, and fined for her own violations. For the first time in history, Karen was speechless. Karen's downfall was glorious. For years, she had terrorized the neighborhood with her made-up rules, fake HOA violations, and clipboard-fueled power trips. But now, she was done. The HOA board hit her with a stack of official violations. The same nitpicky nonsense she had enforced on others was now her problem. Her fence was too high. Her flower pots were non-regulation. And the best part? She had unapproved holiday decorations hidden in her garage, violating her own rules. The moment she was handed her own violation notice, the room fell into a stunned silence. And then, laughter. People cheered. Tom from next door leaned over and whispered, "Poetic justice." Karen tried to fight it, of course. She ranted. She raved. She even threatened to take the HOA to court. But the president shut her down instantly. Karen, you have no authority here. The words hit her like a brick wall. She stormed out of the meeting in a huff, slamming the door so hard that a framed HOA guideline fell off the wall. And just like that, her reign was over. The aftermath was glorious. With Karen's authority stripped away, the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. People started ignoring her completely. She would try to complain, but no one cared. Someone put up a massive inflatable flamingo on their lawn, just because they knew it would make her mad. And the best part? The neighborhood held a celebration. A few weeks later, as a final act of defiance, the entire street put up Christmas lights, months before the holiday season. Karen was furious, but she couldn't do a thing about it. Shortly after, the for sale sign appeared in front of her house. Karen, defeated, packed up and moved away, muttering about the neighborhood going downhill. And for the first time in years, we were free. The grass grew freely. The wind chimes sang without fear. And the mailboxes stood proudly at their non-threatening heights. And as I sat on my porch, watching the glow of newly installed holiday lights, I took a deep breath and smiled. The neighborhood was finally Karen-proof. With Karen finally gone, the neighborhood felt lighter. It was as if a dark cloud had lifted, and we could all breathe again. No more absurd violation notices. No more creepy middle-of-the-night inspections. No more HOA letters that looked like they were printed on a 90s home printer. Life went back to normal, or maybe even better than normal. Neighbors started being friendlier. We waved at each other without fear that someone would report us for excessive social interaction. Tom's cat roamed freely, unbothered. Lisa's colorful flowers bloomed defiantly in all their non-HOA-approved glory. And best of all, the Christmas lights stayed up. It became a tradition. Every year, right before Halloween, we'd start putting up our lights early, not because we had to, but because we could. Occasionally, when I'd be outside mowing my perfectly legal lawn, I'd hear whispers of a new HOA enforcer in another neighborhood. A fresh Karen in the making. And I'd just smile, shake my head, and think, not my problem. Have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare? Share your craziest story. What's the most ridiculous rule you've ever heard of? If you had a Karen in your neighborhood, how would you handle them? What's your opinion on HOAs? Necessary or just a power trip? Have you ever had a petty neighbor? What did they do? If you were in my shoes, what would you have done differently?